I was asked by Apoor to speak on pillars of India's soft power diplomacy, and you see a completely different title there. It's Portland, Porter, and Pastry. So don't be shocked. It's basically, it just so happened that 10 days ago I was in Delhi and I was speaking about soft power and civilizational outreach, all the points that Veena just highlighted. I was talking about that. And like probably Groucho Marx would have said, I didn't want to hear myself speak the same thing again within 10 days in the same city. So I said, okay, let me change the topic. And one good thing about soft power is I got up at 4 o'clock, meditated for a little while, and a moment of epiphany, I got the title. So please do meditate. So, yeah. So the agenda is we're going to talk a little bit of Portland communications and what they did for ranking soft power. They have the last 5 years they have done work on ranking global nations on soft power. Porter is Michael Porter. Pastry is a pastry. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about what they did because this is very important. How many of you are interested to pursue soft power in your careers? One, wow, that's quite a few. So these you must follow that University of Southern California has probably one of the only departments in the world for public diplomacy. And Portland Communications work with them and they've come up with this soft power 30. You all know about Joseph Nye and what he defined soft power, but basic three aspects of political values, culture, and foreign policy. What Portland has done is that they have given weightages, objective data for one set of criteria, and polling data. They polled more than 11,000 people all over the world and got the feedback. So the objective data is against government, digital, culture, enterprise, engagement, and education. And polling data, I can't see clearly, but cuisine, you can see the things. But this is the broad thing, 70 and 30. So these are the 6 things that I was talking about. So this is the ranking of the top 30 that they have come up with based on this criteria. This is for 2018. You can see that UK, France, Germany, and United States and Japan are the top 5. Anybody from any of these countries? I'm from UK and US. UK and US, okay. Anybody else? Germany, great. So these are the top 5 countries based on this ranking. India is not to be seen in that 30, top 30, India is not there. It's 41 out of 60. So this is how we have ranked on digital, government, and culture. That is the strongest that we got the ranking, India's ranking. Yes. So you can see that in digital we got 35, government 37, culture is 38, enterprise is 47, engagement is 47, and education is 51. Subjective data, which is the polling data, it shows that India has 3 main strengths in the eyes of global public opinion: culture, technology, and cuisine. Culture, technology, and cuisine. Am I audible? So we come back to Porter. Michael Porter, most of you must have heard of Michael Porter and his competitive strategy, and he's written a book on competitive advantage of nations. This book, he has taken 30 research assistants and 4 years of effort. He has mapped 10 countries based on the largest exporters, and then evaluated them and came up with this concept of cluster theory. And this diamond model to determine how a nation can be competitive. And the 4 factors that he talked about was a healthy firm structure within the country, related supporting industries, demand conditions. The local country also should have strong demand conditions, and factor conditions like labor, land, infrastructure. He's a Michelin star chef. His name is Grant Ackards. He's a chef. He's based in Chicago. I had an opportunity last September to book myself and have a meal there. He's one of the top chefs in United States. One of the things, you can see what he's doing there. Can anybody guess what he's doing there? It's not a plate, it's actually the table. So you have a meal in the restaurant, and then the final time when the time for dessert comes, so they remove all the plates, they put a fresh cloth, and then he paints and he puts, that's all pastry there, and that's finally people eat it from the table. There's no plate. And one of the things that he came up with is that plates are limiting my creativity, so I want to remove the plate and put the pastry on the table. So that's a very good example of thinking outside the box, right? Thinking outside the plate. Now, when I ate there, one of the things that struck me, and because I'm advocating for soft power, was that we have to think of non-resident Indians as our constituents, as our delivery mechanism. And also think of all the consumption of our culture that's happening globally also as a part of tourism. So imagine if you are a minister for tourism here and you're only looking at inbound travel and inbound visitors, versus you're looking at somebody's going to an Indian restaurant in Chicago, or somebody's going to an Indian restaurant, Indian concert in London. That is also tourism. And NRIs are actually also distributors. So you're actually thinking outside the country and the confines of the geographical region. The NRI population is more than 3 crores, spread across all these countries. You must have seen Hans Rosling's videos on population, very popular on TED. You must have seen his infographics and all that. Now, if you actually look at this, the population by 2050 is going to be 7 billion, and you're going to have 1 extra billion from Europe, and US is going to be static. You're going to have 1 billion from Africa and 1 billion in Asia. That's the increase in population. Why am I talking about that? Is that migration forecasting, whereas Europe and US, the population is not growing, it's also aging, there are also labor issues. There is a need for migrants from Asia to serve the people in the US and in Europe. So this is an important aspect of our soft power. So coming back to Porter and thinking of clusters, cluster theory of, he talks about Italian footwear industry, he talks about Swiss watch industry. You actually look at clusters of excellence of Indians across, right? Then you see Indian doctors, for example, in the US. You can immediately say, oh, great. Did you know that 35% of the strategy professors in the US universities are Indians? Or every year for the last 15 years, spelling bee contests are being won by us? Or there's a professor called Ann Lexon who has done research. More than 50% of entrepreneurs in the Silicon Valley have an Indian connection. either the CTO or the CEO or the CMO. There's a founder there, the Indian founder there. And automatically the venture capitalist, when he sees this as an Indian as a part of the founding team, there is some kind of a comfort, right? So if you look at it, even the old economy, all the motels by Patels, right? So you have, if you see how these, Singapore, for example, I live in Singapore, and Singapore is looking at skill development in Assam for nurses. Because their population is aging, they want nurses from India. So if you see these centers of excellence and how people and this migration that we are seeing is happening, and we can see that Indians have a role to play in services. So she talked about culture, I'm also talking about services. So there is a need. So this is the model that I thought of this morning in my meditative trance. And all the hands that you raised, I would urge you to please get in touch with me at hari@indicacademy.org in the next few days and seek your assistance. I want to develop this model, this diamond model for soft power that is based on networks. So you have these networks. So spelling bee contest, my son has just won the spelling bee contest. But the next year, the parents will be calling me. So there's an informal network that's happening, right? There's a domain networks that are forming. Similarly, the overseas citizens, we are 3% of our population, or 2.5% of our population is overseas. Not many countries can boast of that. The developed countries don't migrate anyway. They only migrate for jobs. But here we migrate for a living. So not many countries can. Overseas Chinese and overseas NRI Indians are probably the largest chunk as a percentage of the population. And then she has already highlighted the factors of soft power within our country in terms of culture, people, capital, infrastructure. But more importantly, the global demand that is there for our culture, what she has highlighted, what the millennials are consuming, which I'll come to, the services, which are the people, the products and other factors. So if you see, there is a need for us to advance Joseph Nye's research on soft power, Michael Porter's research on competitive advantage of nations, build on both these concepts and advance it and build a new model for soft power. I have some thoughts on the ranking that Portland has done. Now, if you see, what are the millennials in the world consuming right now? I call them as the 4 pillars. She's highlighted a lot of pillars. I just want to summarize them into 4 pillars, right? First pillar is that people are traveling not to see a monuments, but they're traveling for cultural experiences, for curated cultural experiences. They want an intellectual element to wherever they go. They just don't want to see something, but they want an overlay of intellectual experience. Craft. Most millennials you go to, they don't want to buy any product which is made by a large corporation. They want to buy a product which is handmade, some village somewhere is benefited because of this product. So what you wear, what you eat, what you use in your house, everything is craft. And India is the largest repository, largest number of villages in the world that survive on craft, that generate craft. Again, care and consciousness, whether it's health, whether it's vegetarianism, whether it's Ayurveda, care is very important. Ecology. And again, consciousness. When I say consciousness, I mean the entire thing about spirituality that we have, whether, according to the Pew Research report, spiritual but not religious is actually the fastest growing religion, so to speak. Everybody is spiritual but not religious. And all the spirituality in India has to offer a very systematic and structured approach to spirituality. So if you see a kind of a mapping of the 4 countries there, China, USA, and India, and if you see those 4 culture experiences, craft, care, and consciousness, India ranks yes on all the four. Now you look back to the ranking that Portland has done. If you see in the objective data itself, the value that they have attached to culture is only 12%, 12.5%. Whereas if you look at Joseph Nye's evaluation, it is culture, political values, and foreign policy, right? And again, if you look at digital, education, engagement, enterprise, I'll come back to how it maps to. This is the criteria for the polling data which they asked these 11,000. Again, culture is very less. But if you see this, again, they're asking for luxury goods and technology products. So if you are using a product from Apple, so then therefore they'll give weightage to the US. So if you actually map it against Joseph Nye's, the political values is getting almost 69%. Culture is 12.7, and foreign policy is 18%. That's the kind of weightage. I believe there is a need for reworking this kind of and balancing the between, if you overlay Joseph Nye's on this particular objective data. Similarly, like I was telling you, if I'm thinking that if I buy an iPhone and I give credit to the US for the design, if I'm using an Indian nurse, or if I am getting taught by an Indian teacher, or a construction worker, or a software, there should be some weightage at the back of my mind that, oh, I know I'll get a good, excellent service. So this is the Center for Soft Power that India Foundation, in collaboration with Indic Academy, has just established 6 months ago. The vision of India Foundation as a think tank is threefold, which is basically advocacy, analysis, and awareness. In advocacy, we are setting up a trade body. We've just set up a trade body called NICE. It's a network of Indian cultural enterprises. I request my colleague to please show your hand. He's also going to take you to Kumbh. So he's going to manage NICE, and he's worked in the MEA earlier. And the idea is to create a NASSCOM kind of a institution for all the cultural enterprises in the world. And that would in turn interface with the government to do advocacy. There's some visa issues for a cook in London, or there are several issues that cultural enterprises world over face. We are, in the analysis, we are working on a dashboard. We are partnered with University of Southern California. And in awareness, we did 9 roundtables on different verticals. The way we look at culture is across verticals. We look at spirituality, Ayurveda, yoga, language and literature, film, music, performing arts, visual arts. So all these design, craft, art. Each of these verticals, we have done roundtables. We have engaged with the specialists. We had the first conference. Shreya, please be recognized. So she was the coordinator for the conference. We had the first conference on soft power last December. We had 66 speakers spread over 3 days, 15 sessions. So that is something we have done. Now we are doing this like all over the world. We have just done in India through its thoughts and senses. We have done in Singapore. Now we are doing one program in San Francisco on entrepreneurs, high tech, and soft power, most likely in April or May. Yeah. So thank you so much. It's been wonderful. We'll take questions. Vinaji and myself will take questions. Thank you.